Hi, it's Alistair at Electric Scotland. Do my introduction to my weekly newsletter for October 5th, 2018. This week we've gone through the Conservative Party conference, obviously in the UK, so there's been a lot going on there. But let me give you a little bit. I haven't given you a tremendous amount on Brexit this week, but obviously I've still covered the odd story or two. But let me tell you what I've done this week. We've got Boris Johnson sets out his Super Canada Brexit plan. It says Boris Johnson has set out his own plan for Brexit, arguing that the UK should chuck checkers and negotiate a Super Canada free trade deal instead. And it seems to be getting a lot of traction, I will say, in the press and everything. But we'll see how that goes. Next story is Port of Cromarty on crest of a wave. It says the Port of Cromarty, Firth, has recorded its best ever year after turnover jumped by 1 million, helping it fuel further investment. So that's a good story. Then one I thought was really interesting was the moon is open for business. It says commercial companies are proposing lunar missions at a pace the world hasn't seen since the Apollo program. Yeah, I don't know, I'm big time into space. I hope they'll do something, maybe get a settlement on the moon, which I think would be really cool. Then another one I found was sailors who transformed World War I prison camp remembered in book. It says the little known story of Aberdeen sailors who helped transform a World War I prison camp with their love of gardening is the focus of a new book. I don't know, I really enjoyed reading that. Then HMS Queen Elizabeth, it says fighter jets land for the first time. As you may know, this is the Britain's new aircraft carrier, and it's at the moment in the States, because obviously we bought a number of the new fighter aircraft for it, so it's been tested out. So there's a bit of video there as well, so it's quite an interesting wee story, that. Despite the fact that some of the sailors on there got into trouble with the local police. However, Europe regains the Ryder Cup with victory over the USA. It's actually quite a big margin won by, so sorry folks in America, but I guess that's life. You won last time, so. Governor General congratulates Canadian Donna Strickland on winning the Nobel Prize in Physics. It's always a good story when Canadians win a Nobel Prize, but also when it's a woman especially. That's also really good. It's a good story, that. What does Global Britain really mean? This is the CapX editorial article. And it says Britain should become the world's leading champion of trade. And I just thought that was a really interesting story, so I thought I would put that in the list here. And then I've got on this day, 1263, Vikings and Scots clash at the Battle of Largs. So a wee history lesson there for you. Then the next one is UK economy shows steady growth. It says Britain's economy appears to have kept up most of its steady growth in the July to September period. So that's good news. Then I've got a set of articles, it's End of an Era. This is Kenneth Roy, who's terminally ill and says farewell to the Scottish Review. He's always been a really good character in Scottish news, and he's written a final piece explaining what's happening, and that's one link. I've given you a second link to a tribute to him, and a third link to a story that he believes is one of his to be his finest work. It's about two girls that committed suicide, and he was showing all the troubles that the social services had looking after these girls. And frankly, it's a terrible indictment, and I read the whole thing. I was just amazed at that. And then Scots for Leave arrives to fill the void. On June 23rd, 2016, over 1 million Scots voted to leave the European Union. And I might add, I was trying to find information about them, and I did a search on Google, which came up with virtually nothing. So I thought I switched it to Explorer News Bing, and I got a mainstream story. In fact, this is the story that I'm giving you here, because they'd indexed it. So I think I'm beginning to come to the conclusion that Google is not as good as it once was, and I think it's going downhill, to be honest with you. But anyway, that's just my view. And then the final story was barnstorming speech by Geoffrey Cox. It's an excellent speech and delivered with the optimism that Britain deserves by our Attorney General. So I've given you a link to watch the video. Frankly, I watched it and I was pretty impressed with him. He's obviously a guy to watch for the future. Okay, so these were the stories I brought you this week. Now about Electric Canadian, I've done the 3 normal volumes I've been doing. Canada's Provinces, we're on to volume 16 now. This is 22, it's the Provinces of Quebec Part 2. I've got the Engineering Journal up for 1956, and the Mining Review, I've got the volume up for 1909. So in addition to that, I've got another book called Our Forest Home. This is big extracts from the correspondence of the late Frances Stewart, compiled and edited by her daughter. Really interesting, that story, so I hope you'll enjoy that. And then I've got Minnesota and the Far West. This is by Lawrence Oliphant. He was late Civil Secretary and Superintendent General of Indian Affairs in Canada. And this book was written in 1855. While Minnesota's in America, the thing is that most of the book's about Canada, but it's going into Minnesota to discuss some bits and pieces, because Minnesota wasn't well known back in those days. And then I've got Louisbourg from the foundation to its fall, 1713 to 1758, by J.S. McLennan. This is an area in Cape Breton in Nova Scotia, and it's from the French period, basically. So I thought that was kind of interesting as well. And then there's one story from Conrad Black, The Re-Emergence of Quebec Nationalism. This is because the party that won the recent elections in Quebec just the other day there, while it's not fighting as an independence party, it's clearly leading that way. So that's, I think, why he's commenting on that. And then Electric Scotland, My Home in the Field of Honour. It's by Francis Wilson Heward, with drawings by Charles Heward. It was done in 1916. It's a PDF file telling the story of a French-American family survived in the First World War while being overrun by the German army. I was quite fascinated with this, actually. I read the whole book and I really enjoyed it. It's an American that married a French guy, so that's why it's a kind of French-American story. But I don't know, I think it reinforced in me that, because obviously I've never been in a situation where another nation has attacked my home and I've had to live through it. I know that there's several people here in Canada, certainly from Holland, that had to live through the Nazi regime there, and so they've worked through it, albeit a lot of them were quite young at the time, but nevertheless they remember it all. but I've never had that experience. So reading that book actually kind of brought a lot of things to the fore for me. And then we've got Best Newfangled Family Tree. It's section 1 of the October 2018 issue. And Clan Buchanan's been in touch, and I got a copy of their newsletter for October 2018. And also I got connections from Clan McLennan, DNA Project people. So he's updated some of the spellings of names and the septs, and has given me a link to the DNA Project, which is on Family Tree DNA. So I've put a link to that for you. The other one I've got up is a political survey of Britain. This is in 2 volumes. It's being a series of reflections on the situation, lands, inhabitants, revenues, colonies, and commerce of this island, and intending to show that we have not as yet approached near the summit of improvement, but that it will afford employment to many generations before they push to the utmost extent the natural advantages of Great Britain. It's in 2 volumes. I will say it's because of the date of the book, which is 1774, the letter S is written as the letter F. But as I say, I mean, when you start reading it, it's a bit difficult, but as you read on, it actually gets a lot easier to read. So, but I think that's why I took so long to put that one up. Next one I got for you is The Jurors of St. Fillan. Got a new file on the jurors, which you can read at the link I've given you there. And then a novel, Katie Stewart. It says A True Story and Other Tales by Mrs. Oliphant, who was produced in 1892. Mrs. Oliphant was quite a copious authoress, basically. So I've actually put a link to that directly to the book. And then finally, I got a wee book in that says Reasons for Extending the Militia Acts to the Disarmed Counties of Scotland. This was produced in 1760. So I find it an interesting book and discussed the merits and possible reasons for not arming the Scots. As you well know, in 1745-6, we had the Claude and stuff like that. So this being written in 1760, obviously these memories are quite fresh in people's minds. But of course it was after that date that we started to form the Highland Regiments, who did tremendous work for Britain for many years. And instead of giving you an actual story this time around, I thought I would give you a link. So I said you might like to read the story of Scottish Canadians from Wikipedia this week for a change. And you can get to this and I've given you a link to the page of Wikipedia. It's actually quite a good overview of how the Scots have done an amazing job in Canada for all Canadians. So I thought maybe you might like to read that for a change rather than read online. Through my newsletter anyway. So I probably won't do that again, but I just thought, as I came across it, looking for something else, I thought that's really a really good big article. Lots of links as well. Okay, so that's it. As I say, I don't think my last newsletter went out to you. As I say, I thought it was working. I've done a test on email and I got the email test. And then when I published the mailing list, I saw it going through, very quick, and said it had completed. So it all looked like the emails were being sent out, but because I didn't get any extra visits anywhere, I thought to myself, I don't think you actually got it. And I've been trying to work with my new hosting company to try and verify whether they actually were sent out. And so far they haven't been able to come back to me to prove that it went out. So I'm asking if in this newsletter, if you get it, if you could just reply briefly, say, got it, thanks. And if I don't get any emails from anyone, then I'll just presume it hasn't gone out and we've still got an issue. As far as I'm concerned, that's the only issue left with moving to the new websites, or the new hosting company rather. So anyway, there you go. I hope some of this has tweaked your interest and you want to read more. And as always, I'll put a link to the actual newsletter with all the links to all these stories underneath this video. So there we go. Hope you have a good weekend and look forward to hearing from you. Thanks for listening.